welcome to the Dean Obeidallah Show and our special Juneteenth coverage. And I'm so happy to have someone on the show who I've mentioned his book numerous times. I've mentioned it to elected officials and various people. I'm not kidding at all. I'm very serious. It's Kane, award-winning journalist, host of SiriusXM Radio's The Kane Show, and author of the New York Times best-selling book, The Grift, The Downward Spiral of Black Republicans from the Party of Lincoln to the Cult of Trump. Clay, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy we can make this happen. And happy Juneteenth, Dean. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you, my friend. And thank you for being here for that. So look, you did your book. The reason I thought it was great is that you went through and you did so much research, and you can tell why it's a New York Times bestseller, because as Democrats, as progressives, you like to learn, and you learn a lot reading this book through time. So first, before we get into it, like, what was your goal when you wrote this book about grifters in the Black community? And were you concerned you'd get any backlash from certain parts of the community for this? Or was it more the concern of like right-wing white people who would say things?
Well, I wrote the book for a few reasons. One, I get so pissed off when I hear Republicans, current Republicans, try to shame Black voters for not voting Republican. Because they always say this one-liner: Black folks were once Republicans. You started as Republicans. And they always bring up Abraham Lincoln and so on. And so, as somebody who has a degree in Black studies, one of the things that I wanted to do was, first of all, explain why we no longer vote Republicans, vote for the GOP, and explain why Black people were literally evicted, exiled out of the Republican Party. I mean, Senator Edward Brooke, Black Republican of Massachusetts, says the Negro, that was his language, feels evicted from the Republican Party. So I wanted to remind y'all, while you bring up this narrative of what the GOP used to be, let's explain why they are no longer that. And let's explain the nuances of where they even were back then in the 19th century, and how we were told you are no longer wanted. This happens in the 1950s and 60s. We are told that this is a white man's party. I mean, most folks of my grandfather's generation, they voted Republican. So I wanted to explain how we as Black folks, we aren't wedded to this D or this R. Whatever the party that will protect the most vulnerable, that's where we're going to tend to vote. Then the other reason why I wanted to write the book is because I wanted to explain, how did Black Republicans go from Frederick Douglas to Clarence Thomas? How did Black Republicans go from Jackie Robinson to Herschel Walker? How in the world did we get here? And we see that it's a downward spiral. I'm not saying that all Black Republicans are alike, because again, Frederick Douglass, Robert Smalls, these are all these great folks during Reconstruction. And now we are down to the buffoonery of today. The original Black Republicans are rolling in their graves. And there's a line from Frederick Douglass. He said, he's talking about a guy, Isaiah Montgomery in Mississippi, a Black man in 1890 who voted against other Black men being able to vote. Douglass said, others will be dazzled by fame and imitate their bad example. Douglass says this in 1890. He saw the grift in 1890. And that's where we are today. These folks have no credentials, and they are a racial security blanket. And we see that there is a shorter line to the front if you are willing to change your beliefs and become someone else. So there are grifters in every community. But as it relates to the current crop of Black Republicans, part of their grift is their race. Part of their grift is their racial identity, shape-shifting around racial politics. So those are some key reasons why I wanted to write the book and remind people of this robust history of we didn't begin here, and this is where we are today. And I am on the rooftop with my book, on the mountaintop rather, screaming, be aware of these people who will shame and hurt their own community, who will make positive references, Dean, to Jim Crow, like Byron Donalds did, who will tell lies about Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. It is shocking to me that Tim Scott, who often says he went from cotton to Congress, will lie about a policy that Black Republicans fought for in the 1960s. I mean, they will shame affirmative action when a black Republican named Arthur Fletcher created affirmative action. So the book is a reminder, it's a call to action, to be aware, to be engaged. You know, in 1868, 80%, 80% of black men were registered to vote, and 18 black women couldn't vote, sadly, in 1868. I want us to have the kind of fever that we
Right.
had during Reconstruction to not only save democracy, but our citizenship and our humanity.
It's kind of remarkable when you give those statistics, and then later, of course, it is pushed back by design, by
Yes.
Jim Crow laws, poll taxes, literacy test, violence. The whole list goes on. So, just so we're all on the same page, when you say grifter, what do you mean? So everyone understands exactly what your definition is.
I mean somebody who will change their beliefs to become someone else. I mean somebody, as it relates to black Republicans,
I say,
that it's not just a money grab. It's not just it's not unconscious. It is strategy. It is tactical. It is a blueprint that I will say and do anything to get ahead. And part of that agreement is to shame and hurt my own community. You see, there is a reward for indecency in the Republican Party right now. And if you are a black Republican at this point, you must, what are some of the key things? Deny systemic racism,
mm-hmm.
uh, blame welfare on black people when welfare isn't a black or white issue, it's a poverty issue. Put out narratives that black folks are shiftless and lazy and depending on things like DEI. So it is shape-shifting around racial politics to get ahead. And you will be rewarded for it. Look at Mark Robinson in North Carolina, who's running for
Oh,
governor right now. This man, Dean, this man literally had no political experience, but went viral for calling Michelle Obama human waste and saying that Black Panther was created by an agnostic Jew. Fox News put him on TV. He was elected lieutenant governor, beat out other white conservatives, and now he is running for governor of North Carolina. This is how the grift works. This isn't Colin Powell.
right.
This isn't even J.C. Watts, who I didn't agree with. This isn't Michael Steele, who in the book, I have a long interview with him.
I saw,
He,
yeah.
ex- he explains this grift as well. So it is the shorter line to get ahead to be contrarian. But the key part of the Black Republican grift is that you are shaming and hurting and advocating for policies that are going to hurt, that are going to demean your old community. I can also get into nuances of the difference of Black Republicans once upon a time and where they are today.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I mean about the grift specifically.
No, I appreciate it. I'm chatting with Clay Kane about his best-selling new book, The Grift, The Downward Spiral of Black Republicans from the Party of Lincoln to the Cult of Trump. So I want to go through some of the people you highlight in the book and profile so that people can hear what they were objectively. For example, you go through Booker T. Washington. I didn't know much about Booker T. Washington. I knew his name. I had no idea. Honestly, I didn't know much. Like, I knew a lot about Frederick Douglass, the contemporary ones, of course, Clarence Thomas and Candace Owens and those people. But tell us about Booker T. Washington, because not knowing much about him, I was surprised to see him in the light that you laid it out. Not that it's inconsistent or anything. I thought he was somehow like a good guy because I just knew his name for all this time. And I'm like, this guy's not exactly what I thought he was.
Well, for some people, Booker T is a good guy. And, Booker T, there's some nuance there. And I try to give some grace to people in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
Booker T. Washington was formerly enslaved. That's a life and a space that I cannot relate to.
Sure.
But 6 months after Frederick Douglass dies, they're looking for a new leader, media specifically. And here comes Booker T. Washington, who was already well known for his, being the founder of Tuskegee University, and, he was known for his speeches, but they're looking for a new leader. And Booker T. Washington, 6 months after Douglas's death, gives his famous speech called the Atlanta Compromise Speech in Atlanta, Georgia. This speech goes viral for the time. And in my opinion, it is horrendous. It basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, defends segregation and says that we need to be as separate as the fists, as the fingers in the fists. And he basically says that Black people wanted equality too soon. This whole thing, Reconstruction, you wanted it too soon. We weren't ready for it, and that black folks should just submit to white dominance and work in the trades, work on the farms, and let white people have control. This speech, given to a predominantly white crowd, goes viral for the time. White women are famously taking flowers out of their hair and throwing it at him.
Wow.
He is praised and worshiped for the speech. The media coverage around the speech, it was astounding. There was lines like, his skin may be colored, but his heart is in the right place. White media praises him. He is the new Negro leader. Now, mind you, Frederick Douglass and Booker T couldn't be further apart, but he is praised for this speech. Black media at the time blasts him. They talk about how dangerous this speech is. How dare you? The very reasons why you are where you are today, being the president of Tuskegee University, is because of the work of black men during Reconstruction. How dare you make these, and black women as well, but how dare you make these horrible comments? How dare you defend segregation? And then this is why propaganda is so important. Just months after he makes that speech in September, by May, Plessy versus Ferguson becomes law, which solidifies Jim Crow. And I'm not putting all the blame on him, but part of the narrative is, you hear it today. Well, if Booker T. Washington says it, then it can't be racist. Right. If a black man says it, it must be okay. Ida B. Wells, W.E.B. Du Bois, Monroe Trotter, John Hope, they are all blasting him in black media. How dare you say this? But Dean, he's rewarded. He gets money from John Carnegie. He gets tons of money for Tuskegee. And what's funny is that his own children don't attend these trade schools. They go to wealthy white schools. He's not even living it in his own life. Now, that said, Booker T did help to, he had the National Negro Business League. He was secretly donating to anti-lynching campaigns. Mm-hmm. But his language up front wasn't about being conservative. It was about shaming other black people, and he was elevated for it. So he is a watershed moment in the grift, because not only did he get access to presidents, financially, he benefited, almost like Clarence Thomas. If there was a Harlan Crow back then, Booker T would have got some coins. You know what I mean? So
vacations, right?
Exactly. He would have been vacationing somewhere. So I wanted to remind people, there has been a revisionist history around him. And in that chapter, I don't even give too much opinion. I lay out what Ida B. Wells says. I lay out what Du Bois says, that the black media was so brilliant back then, and it's still brilliant now, but they were holding him accountable. There was one article called Booker T. Washington, Professor Bad Taste, right? So it's fascinating. And he's still referenced to this day. I mean, a reference to this day as being some kind of conservative hero. And for him, it wasn't about being conservative. Mm-hmm. It was about his pocket, in my opinion.
And so let's talk about someone, though, and you've mentioned already, Frederick Douglass. Everyone knows Frederick Douglass. And what I was amazed how you laid out, I read it in your book and also another book I was reading, his relationship with Abraham Lincoln. And it was very interesting how it evolved over time and how he wasn't too sure what Lincoln was about. And for good reason, because Lincoln had said stuff when he was debating Stephen Douglas that you're like, well, this is white supremacist garbage.
Absolutely.
But then Abraham Lincoln, and we should give people, like to use the term grace that you say a lot, give them grace to evolve when it's sincere. And Abraham Lincoln did evolve. But what I really liked about Frederick Douglass, and it reminded me about the late, great Joe Madison, is that Frederick Douglass supported Abraham Lincoln, but at a certain point, and then pressured him on issues like slavery. And Joe Madison helped President Biden get elected, but then did a hunger strike to push the president he helped elect to deal with voting rights issues, and got press that was inherently critical, but not from a point of tearing the president down, but of trying to be constructive to make him change for the better. And I think that's so important. And to this day, what Joe Madison did and Frederick Douglass, and I cite Frederick Douglass for people and Joe Madison when I say, as a Democrat, I'm a proud Democrat, but I'm going to push President Biden on issues like the Middle East and Palestine and Israel to be more consistent with our values. We elected him for a reason. So there's nothing wrong with being critical of the president you elected. At the end of the day, we're going to come home to reelect him. We're going to work really hard to ensure that he wins, because Trump is horrific, but there's nothing wrong with that. I cite him, and your book is one of the reasons. So what can you share? What is your What sticks with you about Frederick Douglass?
What sticks with me about Frederick Douglass, unlike the cowards of today who are black Republicans, because Douglass was a black Republican,
Hmm.
I would argue although he wasn't an elected official, he is the beginnings of black political thought, right? He is a black political thought leader, and that he had no issue calling out the racism in the Republican Party. He had no issue calling Abraham Lincoln the most famous slave catcher in America because Abraham Lincoln supported the Fugitive Slave Act, which damn near made slavery a national policy,
Hmm.
right? He had no issue calling out how Abraham Lincoln was refusing to let black men fight in the Civil War because he knew that if black men fought in the Civil War, if the North won the war, they'd want their freedom as well. He had no issue when black men did fight in the Civil War, calling out Abraham Lincoln for not supporting the quote unquote colored troops. Douglas was also part of shaping a third party called the Radical Democracy Party to challenge Abraham Lincoln because he was so weak on slavery. So, can you imagine a black man in the 1860s calling out the President of the United States consistently? That's why it's so shameful when I see Tim Scott or Wesley Hunt or Byron Donalds. I mean, this is Frederick Douglass constantly enduring death threats, but still knew for the betterment of black people that we must hold this president accountable. There is no, that Abraham Lincoln was forced into glory, as they say. In the beginning, he had no one. He didn't care about black folks being free or remaining in slavery. He didn't want slavery expanded. He didn't want the expansion of slavery. But Frederick Douglass and others, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, other black Republicans as well, they said, no, you must be at the forefront of this. And if not, we are going to call you out every step of the way. They meet 3 times, and till the third time, Douglas says, this is my first time realizing how Abraham Lincoln does not like slavery. Now, mind you, does not mean that Lincoln was a abolitionist.
Hmm.
Before Lincoln passes away, and Douglas calls him out on this, Lincoln is talking about forgiving former Confederates, giving back their land, giving them the right to vote. Douglas says, what the hell is wrong with you? You're going to reinstall these white supremacists, these former Confederates back into the South. They're going to take over the South. And Douglas was right.
Right.
But up until the bitter end, he's calling him out. And that's the courage that we need today, whether you're Republican or a Democrat. I loved Obama, but Obama got it wrong when it came to immigration. He was the deportation president. And I had no issue saying that. You have to call him out. So when you're not doing that, it's shameful. And the kind of leader and the kind of threat that Douglas was under to push Abraham Lincoln in that direction, it's just so courageous. And we just don't see that today from, again, the black Republicans who will condone, who will excuse, who will agree with Trump reducing black voters to mugshots and indictments. How in the world could you say, oh yeah, that makes sense? People can relate to that. This is just such clownery, and it hurts us at large when we can't all collectively say, this is wrong. And what Lincoln was doing was wrong, and he was called out for it. And thank God that he was forced to listen,
Hmm.
because if he wasn't, Lord knows where we'd be, today.
Right. No, and Frederick Douglass publicly and privately pressured Abraham Lincoln. And by the time of Abraham Lincoln's death, if I remember correctly, Frederick Douglass was praising Lincoln for what he had done in terms of the Emancipation Proclamation, evolving on other issues. And that's the goal. And I'm chatting with Clay Kane. So Clay, let's talk about Clarence Thomas. In your book, you talk about his big grifting break, as you put it, and share a little bit about Thomas's story. Because there were things I didn't know about him. I knew certain things. I didn't know he had smeared Justice Thurgood Marshall. That was part of his
Damn
proving
shame.
his whatever. I don't know what the word is, like his credibility to the white people. Again, he mentioned that people become grifters for different reasons. It's fame, it's money, the proximity to whiteness, that some people just die to be near. They just are dying to be near whiteness because to them, whiteness is success and prosperity. I mean, I'm not oblivious to understanding why, but Clarence Thomas is a special type of person here. So can you share a little bit?
Oh my goodness. Clarence Thomas, again, another watershed moment in the grift. So in the 1960s and 1970s, there were black Republicans in the Republican Party. Policy-wise, I didn't really agree with them, but I can say they were really trying to do some really good
Right.
work. Floyd McKessick, who had Soul City in North Carolina, which fell apart. Clarence Towns, who was in the Nixon administration. They were sincerely trying, and again, there was some faults what they were doing, but it wasn't rooted in anti-blackness. Clarence Thomas comes along, and forget community. He is working with individualism, and he found a formula that if if I downplay racism, if I support someone like Ronald Reagan, who let us know from the very beginning, this is a guy who didn't support the 1964 Civil Rights Act. If I align myself with white supremacy, I'm going to be elevated to the highest echelons of government, regardless of my credentials. I mean, this man figured it out. He is appointed to the Supreme Court for the first time ever, not getting a well-qualified unanimous rating from the American Bar Association. That didn't happen before that, hasn't happened since. He had a Confederate flag on his desk when he was working in Missouri. He shames his own sister at a famous conservative conference, saying that she sits around and waits for a welfare check. I have a brief interview with his sister in the book. And the media at the time, and mind you, it was lies. She was on welfare for about 4 years because her husband left her. But then she got herself together and she was a nurse. Shaming every bit of his family, of the community that he came from. And he was celebrated for it. He's at the chairman of the EEOC, and is not really pushing through discrimination laws as it relates to age, as it relates to race. It was a grand grift, and it was an audition, shaming, disrespecting Thurgood Marshall. Who would do that? And I lay out from articles at the time, people warning us. Rosa Parks says this man is dangerous, but he was ignored. And I shouldn't say he was ignored. There were some folks who didn't take him seriously. Respectfully, Dr. Maya Angelou said she would support him. Derek Bell said that he would support him. And people were wrong. This man was extremely dangerous. And there's a great quote in there from Nathaniel Thompson. Thompson, I could be saying his name wrong, forgive me, who says that Clarence Thomas, all he has to do is say horrible things about black people, and he'll be supported by the Heritage Foundation or other conservative groups. And it really,
Yep.
And I would also add that there was this sense where he's saying all these crazy things now, and his record is crazy, but maybe when he gets into, when he's actually on the court, maybe he will do some good stuff. That wasn't the case. He says that affirmative action changed his life. Then when he's about to be appointed, he's against affirmative action and votes to strike down affirmative action. I mean, the very things that helped to lift him up, he would vote against. And that is a different angle of the grift. That is even beyond Booker T. Washington. The very things, I mean, this is some insidious, dangerous stuff. And Booker T. wouldn't have the same kind of access to proximity to power that Clarence Thomas had. Clarence Thomas got a pat on the head, a big check, and decades later, we see how he, in my opinion, he has waged war against black folks, whether it's voting rights, whether it's the wrongfully convicted. I have a story in there named Curtis Flowers, who was wrongfully convicted. He still wanted this man to be prosecuted. Whether it's Brown versus Board of Education, he has questioned that when literally he was able to attend the schools that he attended because of desegregation. It's a fascinating chapter. And I think he knew what he was doing. I think it was intentional. And there's this argument that he was once a black nationalist. I don't believe that. Folks like to say that because he quoted Malcolm X and liked Nina Simone. No, I think he saw that my access to power will be the greatest proximity to whiteness that anybody could do before me. And other people, they have followed his blueprint. Some crash and burn, like Stacey Dash, and some go on the apology tour. But he hit the grifting lottery, and there's more of him to come, more like him to come. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was saying, like in your book, you know, what I find remarkable, Rosa Parks warned he would take America back, overturning Roe v. Wade and Brown versus Board of Education. And she was 100% Roe v. Wade she got, and Brown versus Board of Education at this point is medium settled law. It's no longer settled as we think, because this court, Thomas leading it, Alito, and the others, I don't know what is settled anymore. I really, as a lawyer myself, I'm like, I thought Roe was settled law. Nope, Brown's not either. So that was remarkable that in your book you had that point that Rosa Parks said that. I was like, what? So there's others I want to get to, and I also do want to get to Michael Steele and Colin Powell, because your book makes a differentiation. It's not a list of the bad black people. Like
No,
there,
it's
you
not.
go through Republicans' very nuanced writing of the book. It's not like an op-ed that I write, which is like bang, bang, bang. Like, there's a lot of nuance in it, and you talk about the Republicans in the Nixon administration trying to do the best they can in a circumstance where they're still looking out for the community. They're not driven by anti-blackness or policies that are anti-black. But let's take a quick break, Clay. We're going to come back, continue our conversation with Clay Kane about his book, The Grift, right after this. You ready? Come back.
Let me just plug my computer in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. We continue our conversation with Clay Kane, from SiriusXM Radio's Urban View, where he hosts the Clay Kane Show, and his New York Times bestselling book, The Grift, The Downward Spiral of Black Republicans from the Party of Lincoln to the Cult of Trump. We'll do one bad one and then one good one in a way, but you mentioned Tim Scott a lot, and a lot of people know about him. I want to touch on that other world, though, the Candace Owens. You mentioned Stacey Dash. Those who it really is going into media, there's not even policy involved that they can actually personally effectuate or impact. It's about making money. And Candace Owens had earned her stripes, but then apparently Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro, whatever benefit that she offered them, it expired with certain comments, so she's gone. So what can you share about Candace Owens and her trajectory to get to supporting anti-black policies? And then we can get to like, what was the line where the white rights, like even that we can't, it's just not worth it.
So what's interesting about the likes of Candace Owens and others is that, like you said, these aren't even elected officials. These are like black Republican influencers on social media. Yet they are profiting. They get access to media, and they get, for Candace Owens, there was a group that she worked with that gave her, tons of money for this whole Blexit movement, for black folks leaving the Democratic Party. It was a failure, but she still profited. And so what's fascinating about her is that she's done some things, like she said, the NAACP is one of the worst groups for black people, but they helped her win a lawsuit when she was, or they assisted, or whatever the case may be, when she was in high school for over $30,000. And now they're the worst group for black people. She was writing for a site that had a lot of anti-Trump posts. And then she came out as a conservative, and they threw her on Fox News. One of her first viral clips on Fox News is when she said the NRA was a civil rights group designed to protect black folks from the KKK. I mean,
fiction writing.
Literally saying this on a cable news network. I mean, this is ridiculous. And she gets away with it. So, but her grift is struggling now because there's a time span for this, and then they like to go on what I call the Black Apology Tour. Stacey Dash did it. Other folks have done it. Omarosa did it. Mia Love kind of tried to do it, didn't work out. And I think we have to remember that she said despicable things about Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, black folks who were shot and killed by police. Just put out terrible narratives, misinformation, lies. And you put out those lies, and then you get away with it because you're a black person saying it. And one of the things that you learn in this book is that black folks can also uphold white supremacy, right? So, she's made some horrible anti-Semitic comments, and now her comments about Palestine and Israel got her in trouble. But, I don't know if her grift has totally expired. I mean, I wouldn't put it past her to try to run for office, believe it or not. People have a short memory. And nonetheless, I think it's important that these people aren't sanitized, that she got her stripes for shaming and debasing black people, saying the Southern strategy was a myth. I mean, all these horrible things that she has said. But listen, that's why the book is a downward spiral, because you have Stacey Dash, who's some falling apart actress. You have Omarosa, who did work in the Clinton administration and got fired, and I had a bizarre interview with her. Stacey Dash, Omarosa, then Candace Owens. So I mean, Stacey, walked so Omarosa could jog. Omarosa jogged so Candace Owens could run. I'm sure someone else is coming down because, as I said, Dean, as Frederick Douglass said, others will be dazzled by fame and imitate their bad example.
And then let's talk about Michael Steele, who I like Michael. Everyone likes Michael. If you talk to him, I can't help but like him. He's been on the show. Last time he was on the show was right before his new MSNBC show kicked off, the one he's doing on the weekend. But I've had him on over the years. I've been on his show over the years. And what I liked about Michael is that he had no problem criticizing Republicans. Although, look, he was the former RNC chair. He was the whole red map guy. He was the reason they won state legislative races. That's just doing the job as being RNC chair. I don't hold them. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the politics should be. We try to win state legislative races. They try to, and then you can redistrict. But what you talked to Michael Steele, you interviewed him for this. What can you share about Michael Steele?
Well, this is interesting, and it reminds me of a quote from J.C. Watts, who was in the House in, I believe it was, I'm forgetting, was it Oklahoma or Utah? I believe it was Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And he said that the issue with the Republican Party is that they expect you to denounce your experiences as a black person to be in the party. And I think with Michael Steele, he wasn't a grifter. Even in his career in Maryland, when he was, I believe, the lieutenant governor of Maryland, he was never shaming black people. He understand why black folks were voting Democrat. He would talk to black media. He wouldn't put out that narrative of get off welfare and stop depending on the white man and government this, government that, and you want them to all take care of you. He tried to engage black communities. He actively tried. But what's interesting about Michael Steele, and we had this conversation, the cardinal sin that he committed was when he said that President Barack Obama and himself are being treated differently. And he told me in the book, that's when really the GOP turned on him. I didn't have policy-wise, Michael Steele, don't agree with everything. But I didn't have an issue, especially in the in 2008, 2009, of him trying to engage black people. I would love it if the Republican Party was a space that we could be in. Sure. Dr. King said in 1964, I am afraid the Republican Party is becoming the white man's party. And if it does, it'll hurt all of us as Americans, Democrats, and Republicans. So with Michael Steele, that was the last window the GOP had to really atone for their sins against the black community, to really try and shape out policies that would help black people. You're not going to get us bringing out Herschel Walker, or you're not going to get us bringing out two rappers who've been accused of murder at a rally in the South Bronx Trump. You're going to get us with actual policies. And Michael Steele was trying to work on policies. And in my opinion, because of that, they kicked him out. And he wasn't willing to grift. One of the most powerful things he said in my interview, he said they gave him a script to go on TV and talk about Obama not being born in this country, which was obviously the birther movement, which was a lie. Right. He refused to say it. And he told me in the interview, he said, that was so deeply racist. It was saying, I'm not even going to call you the N-word. I'm going to say you weren't even born right. And Michael Steele goes rogue after that. He's speaking at DePaul University saying, I understand why you guys won't vote Republican. Rush Limbaugh gets involved and the Tea Party gets involved. And he was essentially pushed out. But I appreciated the effort. Policy-wise, I wasn't always with him, but Sure. He wasn't grifting. Either was Colin Powell. No. I still have questions. The racism in the party was pretty clear by that point, but there was an effort. And the GOP made the decision once again to choose the Southern Strategy 2.0 tactics over actually crafting policies that may help black communities, which means you don't want to help us. You want us to not vote. You want to end public education, and so on. So he was great and so gracious to talk to, and he called out other people. Thankfully, Michael Steele never needed the grift. Other people needed it because they didn't have the actual credentials.
That's very interesting. That to some, that was their only ticket, was to sell out, to be honest, to grift. Now, one of the ones you've touched on, and I want to talk about him a little bit more, is because there's a teeny chance he could be Trump's VP pick. I've been quoted on, I was on MS and go, it's going to be a white guy. I told Eamon, I'm like, what, save this tape. It'll be a white man. I could be wrong at the end of the day, but in my heart, I still think it'll be like a white guy like Doug Burgum, like someone just like on a you have to meet 10 times to remember their name because they're so unimpressive. That's what Trump wants. But in any event, in your book, you talk about Tim Scott and how you'd say you would never call him an Uncle Tom.
Oh,
Why is that?
well, first of all, I hate those terms. I
Sure,
hate the
I know,
term
but
Uncle
there's a reason you
Tom.
said that. I wanted you
Yeah,
to
well,
explain.
well, first of all, well, in the book, Uncle Tom was a problematic character by
Mhm.
Harriet Beecher Stowe, but it was not the context of we think today of selling out other black people,
Right.
of those words like coon, which I hate. And what really angers me, and in the intro I lay this out, I don't call people, oh, you're a house Negro, you're
Right.
a house N-word. Those are terms rooted in slavery, and I would never say that a grifter is even the equivalent to a person who had no freedom in their soul and their spirit. They're in bondage. So I hate that term democratic plantation. I hate that term get off the plantation. That is shameful. So I wouldn't say he was an Uncle Tom. What I would say that Tim Scott is, to quote Zora Neale Hurston, all my skin folk ain't kinfolk. He ain't kinfolk. Uh, this is somebody who has voted against the Voting Rights Act. This is somebody who I have quotes in the book from people who knew him that said he was in it for the money. That was not me saying it.
Right.
That's quotes in the
Mhm.
book. Somebody who has appeared to not really be totally genuine about his own story going from cotton to Congress. Allegedly one of the people in his family owned the most land in the county they grew up in. That's far from being in the gutter of poverty. And he has gotten ahead by saying and doing shameful things, policy wise, to black communities. And this is the other thing about the grift, that for those who have power, it is dangerous. A lot of this rhetoric turns into policy. And we see it now with his performance, his audition. He's auditioning like Clarence Thomas did. Now, I think he represents material danger to black communities. But I do think he has a. I've been saying for a while he will be the VP pick,
You think he'll
and
pick? He could.
if he is, have me on the show. I think it's going to be
Sure.
a white woman or a black man, and I'll tell you why I think it'll be Tim Scott. Republicans always select black people in reaction to. So the only reason why Clarence Thomas is chosen is because of Thurgood Marshall. In my opinion, I adore Michael Steele. The reason why they made Michael Steele the RNC chair is because of President Barack Obama. Now, Michael still had the credentials before Obama,
Hmm.
but they felt like, okay, we have to choose him. They uplift Herschel Walker in Georgia because of Senator Warnock. So I think they want someone to combat Vice President Kamala Harris, a black woman, and they want her on stage for a debate. They want the back and forth battle, and they want it to be another black person. So I think it might just be Tim Scott, unless he screws it up. I don't think it'll be a white man. They want tokenism.
Sure.
They want that, just the image of it. And I don't know anybody who will be at this point more loyal than Tim Scott. Tim Scott has showed his loyalty, and I think he's extremely dangerous. And I want folks to be aware. Now, I will say that if he is chosen as a VP pick, that might incentivize black voters. I bet at the barbershop, and they know who Tim Scott is and they don't like him. The way that black voters got incentivized over Herschel Walker,
Hmm.
that might be a major incentive that nobody could buy. But white Republicans don't get that. They don't get
Right.
why he is so offensive. And it's not because he's a black Republican, because black folks adored Colin Powell.
Yeah.
It's that he is advocating against black people. I'm not saying because you're a black Republican that you're a grifter. It's you're advocating against black people and being celebrated and profiting from it and getting access to power. And in my opinion, that's Tim Scott.
To me, one of the most glaring examples of Tim Scott doing that was when he was working on the policing bill with Cory Booker. And
George
he
Floyd Policing
shared
Act.
just in a nice way, he shared how he'd gotten pulled over by the police, I think 5 times
Oh yeah.
in a year. And I'm
Tears.
like, wow, he's making the case for institutional racism. And he goes, and he concludes, but there is no institutional racism. I'm like, how did you get, was it the same cop every time just following you around DC? You just gave us an example of what systemic racism looks like. That you're a black guy driving a nice car and you get pulled over 5 times in a year and a half. I'm like, you just made the case for systemic racism. And I was like, how could you be that oblivious to that and say that? And they did. And I played the clip on the show in the past. I'm like, the intellectual dishonesty is, there's not even it's in a different world, a different
Yeah.
universe to do that
You know,
stuff.
can I just briefly add, one of the key differences of the Black Republicans of the 19th century and of today is Black Republicans of the 19th century, they were elected in Black districts. They were elected and held accountable in Black
Wow.
districts. That has not happened today at all, none of them. Will Hurd in Texas, who I write about in the book, who I do not think was a grifter,
Right.
was elected in a predominantly Hispanic district. So there's that. Two, the original Black Republicans, they believed in race-conscious policies. They advocated for race-conscious policies. The ones of today, they advocate for colorblind, race-neutral, race shouldn't exist. That's the polar opposite of what the original Black Republicans did. And third, the original Black Republicans built alliances within Black communities. You don't see that today. It's the opposite. The ones of today are building alliances with white conservative movements. So that's what makes them so polar opposite. And Tim Scott is a personification of that. So when I hear him hearken to Blanche Bruce or Hiram Revels or Frederick Douglass, how dare you? If you took a basic Black studies course, you are the exact opposite of them. The exact opposite. You aren't even elected in a Black area. Like, you are the exact opposite. So those are some key differences that shows you the downward spiral.
When you hear Donald Trump saying about the mugshots making more popular Black community and the fact that he's gotten arrested, is that at all for Black voters? Is there some appetite for that in the Black community, or is that for the white right people and it just somehow solidifies whatever negative connotations they have towards the Black community and crime?
Uh, I think that it feeds into the racist Black on Black crime narrative,
Mhm.
and it's some weird reverse psychology. Like, oh, you've impacted by crime, and look at me, I'm a criminal like you because you're all criminals. When I have a segment on my show called White on White Crime. People commit crimes proximity to where they live, and
Sure.
it's actually more poverty on poverty crime more than anything. And that's why there's no relation to the BS that Trump says. And I also think it's just his racism, his stone cold racism, just out there. And so it does resonate with white voters. I don't think it has any impact for Black folks. I'm from West Philadelphia. Nobody that I know of can relate to a rich white guy from Queens falsifying business documents to get elected. Like, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And again, to reduce Black voters to mugshots and indictments, that's where Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt and Tim Scott should be. No, give us some policies. What are your policies? They don't even have policies for their own base. I don't know what their healthcare policy is. I don't know what their immigration policy is. They have one that Trump gutted. I don't know what any of their policies are. I know they said they would flatten Gaza. I believe Trump said that. But I don't know what their domestic policies are. What is it? You have none. And so you're not going to get us that way. And so it infantilizes us. It's insulting. And to me, I hope people are paying attention. I know it's exhausting sometimes, and I guess comments like that gets the base happy.
That's why, Congressman Byron Donalds said what he did about Jim Crow being a better time. It's not for the Black community. It's for
No.
the white community. So the last 2 minutes here, Clay, we look at the 2024 election. We're in the midst of the cycle right now. Do you feel that the Biden administration and Democratic leaders have been addressing the concerns of the Black community? And if they have, where? And if they're not, where are they falling short?
I feel like the Biden-Harris administration has a really great record thus far.
Mhm.
And here are some key things that are important to me. One, Biden has appointed more Black judges to the federal bench than any other president in history combined. And these are civil rights judges. Our judicial appointments, that is the very guardrails to our democracy and our citizenship. You could see the reason why the election wasn't overturned because of a lot of Obama and Clinton judges and some Trump judges throughout those ridiculous election fraud lawsuits. So there's that. That's huge for me. Some other key things: the PAVE Action Plan, which combats racism and home appraisals. That's huge for Black wealth. For the first time, the racial wealth gap has shrunk in 40 years. That's monumental. The advocacy around Black maternal health rate, that's huge for me as well. Child poverty, Black child poverty being cut in half with the child income tax credit. There has been his own administration. It's the most diverse administration in presidential history. There's been some wins. Now, here's my issue with Democrats, is that Democrats can churn even a win into a loss. Republicans will churn a loss into a win. So listen, they're not going to come to your front door and tell you everything. You have to be engaged, and a lot more can be done. I'm not saying this is the end, but whether it's HBCU, student loan relief, I'm happy what I've seen thus far. And there are some folks that'll say, well, I don't feel anything. I'm in Louisiana. I don't feel. I'm in Mississippi. I have to also remind people that the majority of Black folks live in the South, and those are red states. So you may not feel that in Mississippi. You may not feel the infrastructure bill. You may not feel the Affordable Connectivity Program that expanded broadband access that was gutted by Republicans in April. So if you don't feel it in that way, that means we have to turn out and vote locally. So when those federal dollars come down, they'll be properly allocated. So more can be done, but I got to tell you, I feel like he's earned my vote. I mean, not every, has he erased classism and wage disparities? No, but the record is pretty damn good. There's more, but a lot of this has to go through Congress. So I want to see better messaging. I want to see better outreach to Black media outlets. But I could say that he's gotten more than I thought he could get done.
Well, Clay, thank you so much for being on. Again, the book, it's a great read. I can't recommend it. There's a reason why it was a New York Times bestseller. The Grift, the Downward Spiral of Black Republicans from the Party of Lincoln to the Cult of Trump. I look forward to chatting with you again. After the VP pick, you'll come back on.
Dean, quickly, may I just say, thank you for your work, man. I've admired you for a long time.
Oh, thank you.
You do incredible work. Dean, if case y'all don't know, he is also so embraced by Black media. You used to come on Black News Channel often. You do incredible work, and it's important that we all collectively work together. As they say, your freedom is chained and shackled to mine. If I am not free, you are not free. So Dean, brother, I want y'all to know this man does incredible work, and he truly cares. So it's an honor to be on with you.
Well, thank you very much, Clay. I really appreciate it. It's very kind words. I really appreciate it, brother. And I look forward to chatting with you in the future.